Hey everyone, Jeff Dorman, Chief Investment Officer at ARCA, back again for another edition of That's Our Two Satoshis Live, where we talk about everything happening in the digital asset space. And as we continue our series here towards the end of the year and into the new year, I'm joined by another guest here where we're going to talk about predictions. So, Gabby Dizon from YGG, co-founder of YGG, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Terrific. Well, I know that this has been a little bit of a tumultuous year, but I think most things are lining up pretty positively for next year and beyond. So I think it's really timely to have you on here and talk about a space that at one point was probably the hottest and most interesting sector in all of crypto, and has maybe taken a little bit of a backseat recently. But I think, as you're probably about to tell us, the building and the growth continues, even if the focus and the maybe the mind share from a crypto token standpoint isn't there. So let's kick it off real quick with maybe just a quick introduction about who you are, how you get started at YGG, and then we'll get right into your predictions.
Sure. So I've been in the game industry for over 20 years, got into crypto in 2017. First, it was Ethereum and smart contracts, then CryptoKitties, then started playing Axie Infinity, and then started YGG as a way to onboard communities into crypto via gaming. We've been around for the last 5 years, and this year in 2025, we started our own casual game publishing unit called YGG Play.
Well, terrific. And obviously, Arca is no stranger to you and to what you've been building in the gaming space. So before we get started on predictions, just as always, this is not investment advice. Please check with your own people on with regard to investing. But we are going to talk a lot about where we think the market is headed, and specifically, I'll give you a chance, Gabby, just to kind of go through. I think you gave us three predictions.
That's right.
Let's start with number one, with regard to where you think the casual degen and crypto native games sort of start to move in the Web3 world.
Yeah, so this year we started releasing our line of casual degen games. Casual meaning anyone can pick up and play it. You don't have to be an expert gamer or you don't need to spend hours playing it. And degen means it's imbued with some crypto elements, the risk, kind of thrill seeking that crypto native people are want to do. And we can see this parallel back in casual games actually when they started, and casual games really blew up after the advent of the iPhone. And before that, the console was really the dominant form of video games. And when mobile came up, especially the app stores, it really opened up the gaming population and one it meant to be a gamer. Before, people were thinking it had to be a hardcore shooter or a platformer on the console, and then we started seeing games like Angry Birds and Candy Crush. And now my 60-year-old mom could say, "Oh, I'm a gamer." And I think that casual degen games do the same thing. The games that we have aren't for people who want to game 3, 4, 5 hours a day. There are people who are doing that while maybe doing their work, or maybe they're trading NFTs, maybe they're trading perps at the same time. But at the same time, they're crypto native. You have assets that you own. Sometimes you have to put your capital at risk, and these are games that I think um, will have a larger audience than the hardcore gaming audience.
And where does the crypto or blockchain component come into that? Because when we've been doing this now for almost 8 years professionally, we've invested in a fair amount of things in the gaming ecosystem. It always seemed like to me, as a non-gamer, and really kind of in that sort of casual gamer genre that you're talking about, it was always the interesting thing to me was this idea that you'd be able to move assets from one game to another. Like the example that I always give is, could you end up, moving your LeBron James asset from NBA 2K over to, Madden, and all of a sudden put him in as your starting tight end?
Yeah.
Or could you build up, a bunch of skins or a bunch of, assets in one game and move them over and use them in another? That's very different than what you're talking about, with very kind of easy to use.
That's right.
So how does the crypto blockchain component play into that?
I think a big part of it is making use of readily available tokens that you have. So they need not necessarily be game assets like swords, etc., like with the original NFT gaming thesis. It could be not only taking in currencies like ETH or or stable coins, but also, for example, altcoins, even meme coins that you have in your dust, putting them in the game, using them for different things, and then getting rewarded in tokens. We think that these are very easy ways to onboard people into crypto gaming as well.
And with regard to, obviously gaming and gambling in some ways sort of similar. We're seeing a huge, cultural shift in the last 10 to 20 years of gaming and gambling, where pretty much, like you said, everybody has access to it. Everybody wants to do it. And you're seeing a lot of that attention moving into things like prediction markets or things like, for those that are more financially minded, the 0 day options, the zero DTE options on Robinhood and other places. There's basically just a generic kind of a grab, I guess, for the casual user's attention. Where do you think these games fall in that spectrum from, like I said, the those that are just trading financial assets all day long versus those that are doing sports gambling or prediction markets versus playing some of these casual degen type games?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think things like prediction markets show gamification of finance that I think is getting more and more prevalent. And casual DJ games come at it from the other end. You have games that have some form of economy, then you're injecting crypto assets to them. So, in a sense, they're attacking the same thing: entertainment with financialization from different angles.
Are there any specific games you want to give a shout out to that you think people either will be playing a lot more of or that should be playing a lot more of? You mentioned obviously Angry Birds and some of the ones from 15, 20 years ago. Like, what are the ones now that are highest on your radar?
Yeah, of course. The game that we released this year, Lowland, it's made a little bit under $8 million just from the back half of the year, and now we're looking for partnering with other studios to release more titles with the same ilk, like web-based, easy to pick up and play. You sign in with an account abstraction wallet and just make it like very smooth to get in and play.
Terrific, and that's easy for anyone to download from the app stores, or how to, like, for anyone listening to this who wants to play, what's the easiest way for them to?
You just use your browser either on the phone or on the web. Just go to lol.land.
Okay, terrific. All right, great. Moving on to prediction number two here. What is your thought on token structure, or what we might
Right.
look at from, and obviously the gaming sector again, sort of 2021, 2020, had a huge run up. Things like Axie Infinity, probably the most
That's
famous,
right.
but there's plenty of others as well. What does it look like either in the gaming space specifically, or even just beyond that, in terms of what you think the token landscape will look like from an investing standpoint?
Yeah, there's a lot of ink spilled already on low float, high FDV, so we're not going to cover that. But I think that going to what made games and the tokens like AXS successful, and I know you guys were big in AXS back in the day as well, in that they were given at very reasonable valuations, and community had a chance to come in early, which provided a real community around it, which then provided the next run up when more liquidity came in. It's kind of hard to see that these days because now you see, call it like industrial yield farming or trying to maximize early valuations in large races. I think we kind of forgot what made these tokens successful in the first place. When I think when Axie launched, it's launched at probably sub 50 million valuation. I forget
Hmm.
exactly, and there was a healthy airdrop to the players as well. And yeah, that really provided fuel for what happened afterwards. And YGG came alongside that. And I think actually with the success of more recent games like Fableborn and its Power Protocol, Power Token, you're seeing a return to those kind of strategies that have made these early games successful.
Yeah, I think, and if I remember correctly, I think the Axie Infinity ICO came at like 8 cents, or sorry, the private round came at like 8 cents.
That's
But then,
right.
when they launched on Binance, it was like at 10 cents, and you had, even if you didn't get the airdrop, even if you weren't an early user, you still had plenty of opportunities to get it at a very low valuation.
Yeah, you
And I
could have
think,
bought retail and still feel like you were early, which doesn't really happen anymore, right?
yeah, and I mean, obviously, for those who know, I mean, Axie peaked at like $160 or something like that. I mean, that was one of the biggest success stories, at least, for a long while. But also, Axie had a product before they launched the token.
Exactly.
And you look at something like Illuvium that went the other way. It still launched at a pretty low valuation, but they launched, well before they actually even had a live product. And even though they did have a good community, they never actually had that community feel of actually playing the game and being a part of it before they launched that token. So I think you're right. There's definitely a dynamic in play here. So you think you're basically saying you think that the um, low float high FTV tokens are just not going to come at all. Do you have any? Are you working with any teams, like talking to them about this? Because I know we do the same thing. Trying to. We've been doing this for years, trying to tell people like, make your customers money, make your clients money. Don't worry about just coming at the highest valuation. And yet, a lot of these teams still get seduced by the exchanges or the VCs or the
That's
market
right.
makers who are telling them to come at such a high valuation. Are you seeing
Yeah.
any pushback there?
Well, I want to come back to the success of Fableborn and the Power Protocol. I mean, we're a small investor in that, but their success is entirely theirs. We have very little to do with it. But having said that, they're coming in, launching the token at a 60 million FDV, probably still lowish float. I don't know the exact number, but right now you see that number one, the token didn't crash when it launched. And the reason for that was that the game had been in iteration for around 3 years already. It's a good game. People are playing it every day. One of our guys has a guild and he's playing up to 6 hours per day. And there is actual real demand for the token to purchase it and buy resources in the game. So having the patience to be able to develop a product, and you know how hard it is to develop games. They're very hit driven. There needs to be a lot of iteration. You need to find the fun before you release the product. It just goes to show that when games work, it really work, but it's a hard road getting there.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Okay, well, terrific. Moving on, and by the way, I think, like I agree with you that most of these high FTV projects are going to have to go away. I mean, even we were joking internally at Arca the other day, just why there's so much hate on some of these new token launches recently, and it's like it's pretty obvious, right? The Ethereum's, the Solanas, the BNBs of the world came at incredibly low valuations, whereas all these
Yeah.
new launches are coming at multi-billion-dollar valuations. So it's sort of we haven't really seen a successful ICO or token launch in a long time, largely because of the structure that they're coming out at. So I agree with you. I think that absolutely has to make a comeback. These low FTV projects, and hopefully people are listening to us who are thinking about issuing tokens. Okay, let's move on to number three. I think this is probably what everybody wants to know. Where do you see just gaming in general as it stacks up in the overall kind of Web3 sector world of blockchain?
Yeah, so now for the success of Axie in 20 and the mania of 2021, lots of money have been poured in. There has been notably a lot of failures, and right now, people are probably shying away from investing in games. But now we're seeing the separation of the great teams, the great builders, the great games from those that weren't able to make it. And I think that we're about to see a turnaround because we can see who have essentially made it, who have made product. And I think next year, sentiment is going to go back to games simply because we're going to see which products work. A lot of the investing public prior to 21 probably have never been professional game investors. And actually, actual VC in games prior to crypto was actually quite rare because you were investing in content. You weren't really investing in a scalable tech company. And of course, content is hits driven. If it works, it works. And I think that apart from the early mania where all tokens were going up, now we're really basically seeing the separation of the teams that can execute and that can stick around. So we're going to see that. We're going to see some successes. We're starting to see some success now, but I think the momentum is going to go back to games as sector in 26.
And when you say that, I mean, venture would put in a ton of money into gaming over the last 4 or 5 years, and that's slowed down a lot. Do you think that means like ventures coming back into new private deals, or do you think that means retail is coming back into existing tokens that are already out there? Like, how do you see that playing out in terms of the investor focus?
I think that the best opportunities right now are in liquid because there's now a ton of projects that are basically like out for 2, 3, 4, even 5 years in our case, 7 years in Axie's case, and now you can make a better, uh, I guess, better judgment of how the tokens are doing and how the projects are doing relative to their tokens. And so if you make a new venture bet now, you're not really going to see how that pans out for maybe 3, 4, 5 years. But being able to judge the business of the projects that are existing versus their token valuations, that is probably an easier thing to judge.
Do you see any M&A on the horizon, given that there are a lot of teams that maybe couldn't get that second or third leg of funding that they need to finish a project, but they actually have something that is going pretty well? Like, are there any really well-funded studios or games that one might want to do more of a strategic investment into other projects that are struggling to get financing right now?
So what I would say is that it's starting this year in 25, but 26 is going to bring the rise of game publishers, and the publisher is really mostly your intermediary between the VCs and other investors, because they're the ones that are supposed to judge the games, help the game developers produce the games, make sure they have a market. And these publishers are also the ones that may be able to do AMA, maybe acquire teams or IP that have run out of runway and actually make them work and connect them with the user base.
Yeah, makes sense. Where do you, just out of curiosity, where do you come off on, gaming specific type chains versus everything kind of moving to a more general chain? Meaning, like, and this might sound very naive coming from someone who has never been a developer, a builder myself, but you've seen everything from Flow to IMX to Ronin trying to build gaming specific chains. But then you've also had plenty of gaming success stories that are on other chains that are not necessarily gaming focused, like an Avalanche or a Solana or even an Ethereum or an L2. Where do you see that focus from a builder standpoint right now?
Yeah, so from a builder standpoint, it's a very complex question because you have the player base GTM question. You also have the liquidity question. So, for example, Ronin is moving from its own standalone chain to becoming an L2, which I think is great because they've always had that hardcore user base, but they've never been connected to the rest of the EVM network in terms of liquidity. So I think that hurt them a bit in the last couple of years. So being able to solve the liquidity part, having greater interoperability while bringing what makes you unique, which is like I have the players. For example, Ronin right now is just sending a lot of players into Fableborn, and so the kind of hardcore part of the game is full of crypto native players, and that player liquidity allows you to get more casual players that might be Web2 users. So I think that part of the thesis still works, but there's no one thing that you need as a builder. Obviously, you need users, but you also need liquidity. So I think being part of a larger network while being an L2 or something like that, I think that's a good choice.
Okay, great. Let me leave you on this note as we're bumping up on time here. Do you, for gaming to really take over kind of the Web3 space again in terms of both interest and reclaiming the position as one of the strongest sectors in Web3? Do you think it comes from token prices going higher across a bunch of the gaming assets, or do you think it comes from a hit game or a collection of average games? Like, well, how do you think it mostly plays out?
What we've seen with recent successes like Fableborn is that it's actually very rare to have both a good game and a good token. And that's because they are separate products, right? And so having a team that knows how to create a good game, which is usually 2 to 3 year journey, plus know how to navigate TGE, all of the complexities that go with that, market making, the charts, the supply, traders, marketing to traders. Those are very different skills. And I think part of the maturation of the industry is realizing that and knowing that you can't just show up with a good game and have a good token. There has to be equal amount of work put into both.
Terrific. Well, Gabby, this is great. I appreciate you coming on and giving your thoughts. Where can people learn more about you, about YGG? How can people start to play around with some of these games?
Yeah, so on X is the best place at Yield Guild for the main YDG X account. For our game publishing account, YDG underscore play. And then we also have our YDG Discord. Yeah, you just can find it at Yield Guild Games.
Okay, great. Well, I encourage everybody who's watching this to certainly play around with some of these games, test them out yourself. I know a lot of the guys here at ARCA are pretty big gamers and are constantly testing and giving feedback to founders on some of these games. So let's see if you're right to see if gaming can recapture some of that lore in 2026 and beyond. Gabby Dizon, I appreciate you joining me. And for everyone else, we'll be back with more predictions later in the week. as well as our regular That's Our Two Satoshis blog and videos thereafter. So happy New Year, everyone, and we'll be back again soon. Thanks again, Gabby.
Thanks for having me.